Okay, waiting room is now completely empty. Oh, two more people have just popped in. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the launch of the Twickenham Riverside design and the beginning of the next step in the consultation process. So welcome to you all. We have nearly 170 people taking part at the moment. I'm sure that we will be getting more in. If you've been living in a cave for about the last 40 years, you will not know that there is a certain history regarding Twickenham Riverside and various attempts and iterations of design in order to create something which will be a delight and a marvel for the people of Twickenham and beyond to enjoy, and for not just this generation but generations to come. And this is the latest, and I'm sure we all hope last, presentation that we will ever have regarding a Twickenham Riverside's design. And there have been many people who've been involved in all of this over the last few months, not least the design group, the stakeholder reference group, the RIBA, the Royal Institute of British Architects, and of course our partners with Hopkins and the various companies which are working with them, and local residents who've been feeding in across the whole time. So what we're going to be having this evening is a presentation from Chris Bannister from Hopkins Architects, and he's going to be showing you the latest designs, and then we will be encouraging you to ask questions such as you may have regarding the design, the site, or any questions you may have regarding the Riverside in general. And I will be fielding those. The way that you can ask questions is quite simple. We have the chat function enabled. What we would like people to do, don't raise your hands, just write the word question, and ideally just some sort of slight indication of what the question will be about. So if it's about parking or servicing or the Diamond Jubilee Gardens, just write question and then just a couple of words, not the entire question because it gets terribly cut in there, just a question and then the broad theme that your question is going to be about. And then we'll be able to come to you in turn as we go along. Please don't use the hands raised function, because if you do that, then you get taken out of the main list and somewhere else. And if you can avoid using the chat function just for general chat and opinions, that will help as well, because what we find when we did the community conversations over the last year is that people's questions get missed because there's such a lot of text, and then they write me very shirty letters saying, how dare you deny my democratic right to ask a question? And I have to explain there's nothing to do with that, it's just that we missed them, it's more by accident than design. So I think that's enough from me. Just to remind you of the housekeeping rules, everybody is going to remain muted. When you have a question called, we will invite you to unmute yourself. You will see a little box coming up on your screen, and you need to click on that in order to unmute. We don't think that we're going to need to eject anybody. I'm sure that we won't. However, we do have our digital bouncers on standby, and if anybody is causing a bit of a ruckus, they will be taken into a digital antechamber and reminded of the rules, and then if they agree to abide by those rules, then they will be let back in. So I think that's enough. So what we will do, what we will also try to do is to make sure that as many questions get answered. We probably won't be able to answer them all, as we've only got 90 minutes. So we will try to get hold of as many people as possible that didn't get their question asked, and we will try to get that answered in writing. So if Chris Bannister from Hopkins is standing by, and whoever is doing the NHS, not the NHS, the Downing Street protocol of next slide, please, if they could also be standing by, I will hand over to Chris, who will show you what we've all been waiting to see this evening. Thank you.
We've got the presentation available. I can't see it, actually. Can anybody else see it?
Just starting now, Chris. Here we go.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you very much. In fact, actually, I think if you advance 2 slides, because I think there was a slide put in of the, if you go on to the next slide and then the next one. That's better. Okay, great. Thank you very much. So I'm a director of Hopkins Architects. I've been involved in this project for 9 months, and very happy to be involved in it, which is a fantastic project and creates a fantastic opportunity to make a new heart for Twickenham and to reconnect the Riverside to the town centre. The central idea of the scheme is the removal of the car parking that currently exists on the embankment, and its replacement with a series of activity zones that maximises the opportunity for the citizens of Twickenham to engage with and enjoy this fantastic location on the river. Over the last few months, we've been developing the competition-winning scheme to ensure that it meets the brief, is compliant with planning policy, and meets the requirements of the key statutory stakeholders, such as the Environment Agency. Next slide, please. The re-provided Diamond Jubilee Gardens takes centre stage in the new scheme and provides new play space for people of all ages with great views over the river. This space naturally extends to the riverside promenade with ample opportunity to get close to the water. The existing mature trees that exist at the rear of the King Street are retained and form an appropriate backdrop to the gardens. A new children's play area with tree houses and slides will weave its way through the base of the trees. Accessible routes into the garden are being provided from each of the main approaches, as you can see indicated by the red arrows on the plan in front of you. To the left of the garden sits the new Wharf Lane building, which will have flexible commercial space at ground floor level, with a pub restaurant at the end, which will create an excellent destination point for residents and visitors with great views over the river. To the right of the garden sits the new Water Lane building, which will contain a new cafe overlooking the gardens and the play area. This building extends up to King Street, and the new shop frontage will help strengthen the town centre offer, drawing people down from King Street into the new gardens. Next slide. This is a view from the London Road to King Street Junction, looking down towards the river. The new Water Lane building replaces the existing Santander building on the corner, and in line with comments made at previous consultation event, it's been slimmed down from earlier versions to create a much wider pavement that will enable the feel of Church Street to be continued down to the river edge. The opportunity for market stalls and tables and chairs to be set out on the pavement. The widened street also opens up a view of the Eel Pie Island bridge that you can see at the bottom there, creating a greater connection with the river. Next image. The top image is a view as you enter the gardens from the Water Lane at the upper level, giving you fantastic views up the river. We are working with the Twickenham Riverside Trust to develop the detailed design of the gardens, which are being set out to create various areas for children and people of all ages to play and relax, and to enable organised events to take place. The images that you can see at the bottom of this slide aren't actually of this, they're actually of other places, but they're really just to give you a sort of indication of the sorts of look and feel that we're aiming for. Next slide, please. The embankment will be a different sort of place that will complement the gardens. This will be an area of activity, a lively space that draws people to the riverside. It has been designed to make use of the changes in level to create tiered seating that will allow for different events such as outdoor cinema showings and concerts, as well as regular markets to be held. It can also be a place to relax and enjoy the view, connecting the gardens to the river edge. Next slide, please. This is an aerial view looking down on that central activity space, where the tiered seating has been arranged on two sides of the event to create an informal amphitheatre where people can sit and look down on the activity below. Next slide. The event space has been created to be flexible so that it can be used in a number of different ways to hold a variety of different events, from sporting events to fairs and markets, and even outdoor cinema showings. You can see here a series of different layouts showing how it can be set out to accommodate those. To the left of the event space is an area that's been identified for river-based activities. This is adjacent to an existing boathouse on the Thames 8 site next door that Habitats and Heritage, a local conservation charity, are looking at bringing back into active use. The possibility of providing complementary facilities and a pontoon in the river are also being currently explored. Provisional agreement has been reached with the Environment Agency to allow a removable boat storage structure to be located against the flood defence wall to the south of the pub/restaurant. This could be suitable for storing kayaks and paddleboards for use by local clubs and will provide additional seating area in front of the pub at the higher level. Next slide. In terms of building uses, the ground floor of both buildings will contain public-facing accommodation. The Water Lane building will extend the successful Church Street with smaller retail units that draw the eye and encourage people down Water Lane. With its widened pedestrian walkway, there will be opportunity for active shop frontages and even market stalls. These retail units lead down to a garden cafe with views across the gardens and space for outside tables. The Wharf Lane building provides office space, which is envisaged may follow the popular model of co-working space, and a riverside pub restaurant with an outdoor terrace with river views. This pub/restaurant will help to create a focal point at the western end of the scheme, as well as celebrating the riverside location. Both buildings will contain residential accommodation on the upper levels, of which 50% will be affordable accommodation for rent or shared ownership. Having residents on the site will help bring life and activity to the scheme and create a sense of place. Next slide. Architecturally, the aim for the two buildings is for them to be related so that they work together to create a sense of place, but also that they express their own individuality. They're both composed of simple pitch-roofed elements that are brought together in different ways. Next slide. The Wharf Lane building is the more complex of the two and consists of 3 different heights that help break up the skyline, whilst at the same time giving a degree of identity to separate elements like the pub that you can see in the foreground on the left-hand side. In terms of materials and appearance, we are looking at using a more of a frame type structure that picks up the language of the nearby boathouses and relates the building to the river. Next slide. Water Lane, on the other hand, is a much simpler building that is 3 stories in height and built out of brick to help it relate to the other brick buildings on the town centre. Next slide. In terms of vehicle movement, both Water Lane and Wharf Lane will be open to 2-way traffic, but due to the removal of the car parking from the embankments, they will see a reduction in the overall volume of traffic using them. Water Lane will provide access to a number of dedicated service bays for Eel Pie Island adjacent to the bridge. Due to the width of Wharf Lane, there will be some restrictions on larger vehicles turning left into Wharf Lane from King Street. In order to get around this, it is proposed to allow a limited number of vehicles affected to go down Water Lane and cross over the embankment. This access will be restricted and limited to certain hours of the day to minimise its impact on the use of the embankment for other things. And that's represented on that diagram by the dotted line that you can see there. Next slide, please. In terms of pedestrian movement, the aim has been to make the gardens as accessible as possible. And the green routes represent the accessible routes across the site that do not require the use of steps. Due to level differences, it's not possible to avoid steps entirely, and the red routes indicate those routes that require the use of steps, but we've tried to keep them to an absolute minimum. Next. In terms of cycle routes, there are a number of cycle routes across the site and cycle parking areas that provided strategic locations around the site. Next slide. And finally, to end this presentation, this is an aerial view of the scheme that shows how it all comes together to create what will hopefully become a vibrant and exciting new destination for the residents of Twickenham and beyond. At this point, I'll hand back to the chair who's going to manage any queries that you may have. Thank you very much. I think you're muted, Gareth.
Okay. See, I'm nothing if not compliant with the muting strategy. I hope you found that an interesting and exciting presentation. I think I have to say I'm biased, but I think this is possibly, if not the best presentation, the best scheme that we've had of all schemes that we've seen over the many decades that we've been trying to sort out this problem. We have a top flight architect. We've taken on board everything that residents have asked us for, including removal of traffic and parking off the riverside, the widening of Water Lane, enhanced Diamond Jubilee Gardens, a destination for Twickenham, not just now, but for the future. So now is really the time when we want to hear from you for your questions. And I will be going right back up to the top as we had some straight off the bat. First question comes from Jill Papworth. Jill, are you with us?
Hi, thanks very much.
Hello,
good
Jill.
evening, everybody. I'm interested to know, it's a minor query. Will the memorial bench that I had installed for my late husband about 18 months ago stay in place? If you're looking at the site from the river, it's the first bench to the left of the bridge to Eel Pie Island. What's the plan for memorial benches?
So these are the benches which are right in front of the still as yet undeveloped site, just behind the Santander car park.
Hang on.
So if you come down,
Yeah.
Water Lane,
If you're looking at the embankment from the river, you've got Eel Pie Island Bridge to your right.
Yep.
Okay. And looking at the river front there, the bench I had installed is the first one to the left of the bridge.
Okay, I don't have a direct answer for that, but we have your email address and we will be certain to be in contact with all those people who have had memorial benches installed within the embankment to make sure that they are sensitively handled and replaced in a sensitive location. I can't give you a direct answer on the specific bench today, but we will of course be in contact with you about that.
Okay, thank you.
Not at all. Okay, so then questions about sound. So here we are. But it's an existential question from Mac from the Heatham Alliance.
Thank you very much, Gareth. Not so existential, but getting back to basics really as to why we're spending 30-odd million pounds on this scheme, because we're getting mixed messages as to what the actual purpose is of the project. Why exactly is this project being undertaken so that we can actually measure what's being presented by Chris Bannister against what the objective is? And where can I find a clear, concise statement of the real objectives of this project?
Oh, well, I think one of the officers might be able to help on that in terms of the design briefs and what have you. Is anybody there that can point us in the direction of those? Anna Sadler.
Yeah, fine. I can see Paul looking to speak.
Go for it.
Yeah, absolutely, Mac. So the brief for the design competition and then the refined brief for Hopkins and the design team can be found on the council website. If you go onto the council website and look up the Twickenham Riverside development, the page that our consultation is on, there, if you follow that down, there's a piece about the design competition and the brief is there. But if you can't find it, please let Charles and I know. And if you give us your contact details.
I've got Mac's email address. I can make sure I send you the link, Mac.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
So there's a brief for the competition and then there's a further refined brief for this.
I'd be interested to see this because going back, this Riverside development project actually sits as part of a much broader scheme to regenerate the town centre of Twickenham. That's what I'm really anxious to see in here. is features being built in by Chris Bannister and his team that will really attract new people to this area to come and spend their money here in particular, to help to revive the local economy and ensure that we have really thriving local businesses, independent shopkeepers down Church Street and in the neighbouring streets.
Absolutely, and this is very much what we're hoping to do. This is a first stage, really, of a broader plan for Twickenham of regeneration. But this is the first stage, and we will be bringing, once this is done, we will be looking to bring forward further plans at a later date. But you're quite right. Regeneration of Twickenham and bringing new visitors, new residents, new businesses, a destination for people to come to is absolutely a top priority, which will be delivered, in my view, by this scheme.
Thank you.
Okay, so then we move on to Mark Stewart. Do you still have a question? You said question, please, and then listen to the presentation first.
No, I was asking the people asking questions to listen to the presentation before posting questions, because a lot of the answers were made during the presentation, which I thought was very good. Thank you, Chris. It was a brilliant presentation, very clear.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. Julie Harness, a question about a boat pontoon.
Oh, hello.
Oh, you've just muted yourself again, I think, Julie.
Hello, actually, it's Tim Harness. I belong to the Skiff Club in Teddington, and I wonder if there might be a longer pontoon along the embankment where we could tie skiffs up. Something bigger and a bit more substantial than the pontoon for kayaks that I saw in the presentation.
Okay, who can help with that question?
Well, I could probably say this is very much, it's Paul Chadwick, Director, right? I mean, I didn't just initially say, I'm sure others can add, that this is very much a part of the scheme that's in development still. We're really excited about the thought of having a riverside area, very active, but exactly how we deliver that and exactly what we allow for in terms of users is very much one for you to comment on, really, and to say to us, this is what we would need as a skiff club, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's just early days on that for the moment. I think that's fair to say, isn't it, Chris?
Yeah. I mean, if people have got sort of views on what sort of things they want, then please let us know, and it'll be very useful for us to kind of know what people are after, really. So,
Great. I'll do that then. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what we want to be able to make sure that this isn't just a generic development which could be plonked down anywhere, you know, whether it's in the middle of a town or the middle of a high street or in the middle of the countryside. This is a riverside development, and we would be foolish not to take advantage of the opportunities which arise from having, use of the river and providing riparian activity within this site. So this is a riverside development. We want to make sure that we're embracing that aspect of it. And
as much detail as you can provide as to what sort of things you'd be looking for would be useful, I think, really. So, yeah.
Excellent. So, Sparks is what we have here, who has a question about disabled and less mobile access to the riverside.
We've sent a request to unmute. You'll just need to accept that. There you go.
Hello. One of the key benefits of not having the scheme is basically that anybody who is disabled or has difficulty in moving around can drive down to the riverside, and it's one of the best views in Twickenham of the river. But it seems that, even looking at the diagrams, there are steps going up. There are very few access points other than parking across the road and maybe getting someone wheeled down to the riverside. And it seems that a whole group of people have been excluded from the plans. And I think this ties in with the concerns about the parking overall, in terms of the fact that, additional residents will move parking up to the other car parks, again with the car park spaces that have been removed. I'm just wondering how that all fits in with the overall regeneration of Twickenham in terms of who you actually expect to use these facilities and how they will get there.
Okay, could we bring up the slide relating directly to the overviews regarding the steps? Because I think that it's not quite true to say that there is little in the way of access. There is, if you are looking at this slide, so Water Lane has got a continual line going right through from Wharf, and there is only within the actual site itself, if you exclude Water Lane, there are only 2, 3, 4 very short spaces which are stepped, and we have taken a great deal of care to ensure that there is ramped access and accessible access throughout the site. Can we bring up these slides regarding the vehicle movement? And just on there, you can see that there are parking spaces which are directly adjacent to the site itself. They're not just the ones with the figure of number 1, which is the Eel Pie Island servicing, but there's parking bays available on Water Lane, some on Wharf Lane, one just down the bottom. There is, of course, all of the parking which exists further down the riverside. And of course, there will be the other parking spaces which are within the greater area of Twickenham, such as Holly Lane Car Park, which is not too far away at all. I think that really, just on terms of the residential, I think we're right in saying that this will be no parking permits are going to be given to the flats. So people will be buying these flats in the knowledge that they will not be able to, if they want to park a car, then they're going to have to go some considerable distance to find a non-resident bay in which to leave it. So we are trying to minimize the number of cars which are going to be generated by this development. We can't, it's absolutely impossible unless you were to have a borough-wide CPZ, absolutely impossible to prevent it. But we are of the opinion that people who are going to come and buy these flats or live in these flats or rent these flats are going to be people who will not be reliant upon the car because of the very good public transport links. But we are trying as much as we possibly can to ensure that this is a riverside which is accessible for all.
But have you done any surveys on how people are going to get there and who your potential market is? I mean, because, from my perspective, I think, I'm late 60s now. So, and I take my father-in-law down to the riverside occasionally just to sit, so, just the access to the riverside is quite, it's been removed from a lot of people. And I think that's a serious concern if you're trying to address, everyone in this project.
Well, I would counter and say that the reverse is true, that the riverside is being opened up, to be honest, to a lot more people than people who would just at the moment want to come there and park a car. It's going to be a destination area. We know that people want to have this area as pedestrianised, fully pedestrianised as is possible to have. So that they can enjoy the riverside without the problem of cars coming past on a regular basis, so that children, young, old children, older persons, middle-aged persons, anybody can just enjoy this as a beautiful riverside park rather than a car park. And this is what we've heard for, not just with this development, but for all of the developments, to be honest, going right back to those who remember the Dawnay Day proposals and all of those ones, to say that they want to have a destination rather than just somewhere to park a car. Of course, we need to make sure that we are attracting as many people and making this as accessible as possible. But, I think that this scheme delivers on that.
Well, except for the fact that everybody's really got to come by public transport, because, you're reducing the amount of parking in the other car parks by moving the car park spaces from here into Holly Road, or and if you are giving spaces to the new residents, that's further reducing it. So in terms of the capacity for visitors, that's reducing as well. So it's hard to.
Well, can we just? I think we should respond to that. Nick O'Donnell from our transport.
Yeah, Nick O'Donnell is here, and we've done a lot of work on the parking strategy.
Yeah, I think we need to sort of respond to that point. I don't agree with that point, but Mr. O'Donnell, Nick O'Donnell, is my lead for parking matters, and he's going to make some comments now, I'm sure.
Thanks, Paul. I mean, I don't want to get into too much detail, but just to clarify one important point, and that is that the parking that's being removed is not all going back into the car parks. We're looking at a number of factors here. One is that the current parking is very underutilized and misrepresented in places. So you have a lot of redundant car parking space that doesn't get used up a lot. So it's about reallocation, redistribution, reuse of some of the existing car parking spaces right on the site, plus the re-provision of car parking spaces within immediate proximity of the site. So nearer than where the car parks are, there is space, there is the ability to put in and provide permits and spaces for users. And that includes disabled bays, and also disabled badge holders can park within reasonable extents pretty much anywhere across the site in relation to yellow lines, etc. They have that dispensation naturally. So there is plenty of ability for people to come to the site and park up within close proximity.
Thank you, Nick. Okay. Well, thank you for your question. We'll move on to Elaine, who is asking a question about public conveniences.
Councillor Roberts, sorry, this is Ellie. Elaine, is it Elaine, not Elaine Hall?
No, it's
Elaine,
just Elaine.
Elaine doesn't seem to have her microphone enabled.
Okay. Well, to answer the question directly, Elaine, we are looking to see whether we can provide public toilets within the site. It is something which is under close consideration at the moment. Obviously, with the cafe and the pub stroke restaurant, they will have toilets available there, and we will be ensuring that they are fully signed up to the community toilet scheme, whoever is running them. So yes, I believe that there will be some form of toilets provision on site. Gareth Ward is next.
Yes, I'd like to know which phase of a project are we in? Because are we still in the concept phase?
Oh, it's a different question to what you had. Is where are the Diamond Jubilee Gardens? Yes,
I have a question on the phase. That was my first question. So
okay.
I'd also like to know where the Jubilee Gardens are.
Okay, the phase we're in at the moment, Mr. Ward, is that this is the final consultation process before we then, in the coming months, move into the planning process. And so this is an opportunity to give thoughts and feedback on the final iteration of the scheme before we move into the planning process. In terms of the Diamond Jubilee Gardens, if we could bring up the slides again.
It's a pity the slides weren't developed for demonstration on the screen, because everything is so small.
Unfortunately, we were trying to wrestle with that issue, Mr. Ward, but they will be available online and you can zoom in as much to your heart's content after the presentation. But unfortunately, the way that we're set up, we weren't able to do that. So if you can see right in the center, plumb spang right in the middle, is the Diamond Jubilee Gardens. You can see a children's play area, the petanque pitches, terraced lawns, various trees and what have you. And of course, we are in current discussions with the Twickenham Riverside Trust, who run the Diamond Jubilee Gardens, to ensure that they're satisfied with the provision which has been made and all that, and they're looking to see whether we might be able to do some arrangement with them to use the lower tiering area as well. So the Diamond Jubilee Gardens now sits right in the heart of this, as opposed to being slightly to the side. So this is going to be, I think, a much enhanced Diamond Jubilee Gardens created for the residents, which is, again, something which people have been asking for as part of the consultation process.
So the area of the Jubilee Gardens is not compromised then?
No. One of the red lines that we had with the Twickenham Riverside Trust was to ensure that we were matching, if not providing more space than they currently have, and this has been achieved within this new design.
Okay, so you're about to move into the developed design. Who's project managing this project?
Garth, we've met before, haven't we? I'm Paul Charrett, I'm the Director of Environment. I'm the what's called the Senior Responsible Officer. So I think that's me. Your term is me.
Okay.
Okay.
So can I just add, Gareth?
Yes, of course.
I think we can be very clear that the Diamond Jubilee Gardens and the agreement with the trust will extend the Diamond Jubilee Gardens forward from what's shown there into that events area between the gardens and the river. So much of the embankment will be a part of the Diamond Jubilee Gardens Trust holding. That's the intent.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much for your questions. We now move on to Steve Morrell, who wishes to ask a question regarding the cycle lane strategy and how this will link into much needed plans for safe cycling through the town centre for families and children.
Hi, can you hear me? I've been muted and unmuted. Good. Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, I'm really, pleased to see what's being proposed. So I think, it's very difficult to find the right balance, and I think that this looks really quite exciting. And I think my question is almost more of a plea than a question about detail. And it's just making sure, from a cycling and pedestrian point of view, and we've talked about access already, and we don't want cars going there. We want to make it somewhere that people are comfortable to get there by other more green means of transport. So just make sure when we're thinking about cycling in particular that we think about infrastructure that not just protects cyclists. I'm not trying to just talk about the bikes, but also particularly pedestrians, so that we don't end up with something that's confusing and mixed up. That means pedestrians get worried by cycles, cycles get worried by bikes. And perhaps the bigger question, which I accept is outside the scope of this particular planning, but I really hope that we can somehow link what cycling routes we build into this scheme into much safer cycling in the main parts of the centre of Twickenham as well. Because if we can make safer cycling through the town, I think it's much more likely that people will be comfortable to cycle with their families to this type of venue. So it's less of a question and more of a plea.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for that. One of the members of the stakeholder reference group was the Richmond cycling campaign, and we were keen to have them involved from a very early stage so that we could make sure that this was going to be a fully accessible green space. And not just cars. That's the thing that we're trying to get at. It's it's pedestrians.
And most of the issues you get between cars, bikes and people is because the infrastructure isn't suitable, and then they got mixed up and they start to get cross with each other. So how we can avoid that with this development would be brilliant.
Good, excellent. Thank you for your comment. We're going to a question from Ben regarding the affordable housing, social housing and commercial mix, and whether it will be integrated.
Hi there, thank you, Gareth. Hello.
Oh, hello, Ben.
It is me. I mean, I suppose this partly goes back to the question somebody raised about the financial costs and the justification of that. And it's the clarity really, I suppose, comes out of perhaps getting some information about how much the scheme has to wash its face or make a profit, or how much it's going to be subsidised, because that will influence to a large extent the amount of social housing, affordable housing or housing for private sale. And because I haven't seen anywhere any answer to that question about the economics underpinning this, it's hard to understand, to know quite how that might be interpreted in terms of the housing mix. I mean, I think generally one welcomes the fact of repopulating the side, not having an empty desert in the evenings or late into the night, and having people moving back into the centre of towns, and I think that's bound to be the future. But perhaps just some comments about what the mix of housing will be, and I think a plea that where there is a mix of housing, that it's integrated. You don't have public housing at one end and luxury private housing at the other. Something rather more democratic would be welcome in my view.
Yeah, those people who've seen me on, well, when I used to be on the planning committee, will have seen my usual rants about poor doors and stuff like that, and that's not what we're hoping to achieve at all from this scheme. We are aiming for 50% affordable housing with a mix of tenure of affordable rent, and now I can't quite think of what the word is. Shared ownership. That's it. I knew it began with an S. So yes, that's very much the objective. But the view is that this is a council-owned site. There are very few council-owned sites which are available for development within the borough. And I know this is going to probably sound a bit woke, but I think there is something of a moral imperative on behalf of the council to ensure that we try to maximise the amount of affordable housing within any site which we have direct control over, to ensure that we can, that we don't just create a very nice suburb, but for any people that can afford it. So, I mean, yes, we do need to make sure that we are getting some financial return on the site, because there is a wider responsibility to the council taxpayer, not just of today, but of the future. But we do need to make sure that we're getting the best value for the site, but at the same time, not being afraid to invest council resource to make sure that we get the best possible site. One of the failings that we had over previous years is that there was this idea that the site had to wash its face. And every time the big failing has been that, corners had to be cut, compromises had to be made. This time the council is investing in the site, and I think that that's exactly the right thing to do.
Okay. Can I ask you a quick supplementary, which is...
Yes, of course.
It's been triggered by your reply, really, which is about how we're going to ensure quality at the development stage. And I think somebody was asking the question about who's the project manager, and I guess the question here is some clarity about who's the client and who's going to, how is it going to be taken forward in financial terms?
Yeah, perhaps I can.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, it's a good question, and yeah, just to stress, this is very much a different to private developer approach to the site, and it will not wash its face because of that and because of the affordable housing. But it's a different approach as well for a council, in that often councils do enter into developer partner arrangements, and kind of through those arrangements tend to lose a bit of control, and tend to lose control, therefore, of the final scheme's detail and sometimes quality as well. Qualities can slip sometimes in those developer partner arrangements, no matter what the percentage split of risk and profit and the like. But in this case, we're more or less decided that we want to, as a council, maintain control of the site, because it has been such a sensitive site over the years. We want to ensure that what we show you all in these consultations is what, subject to minor amendments and changes per your views, is what we actually deliver and what actually see once built. So the intent is to control the scheme through essentially being the employer of the construction company that delivers it, and having direct arrangements with those who will sell the units, be they commercial, be they private for sale units, and be they the affordable housing units. We're going to try and maintain control of all of that so that we keep the standards high.
And will you be retaining Hopkins as the architect through the life of the project to completion then?
That's the intent. Yeah, one way or another, that is absolutely the intent.
Great. Thank you very much.
Whether they like it or not, Ben.
Yeah.
Trying to get out.
Subject to what is now a difficult fee discussion.
Yeah.
I bet.
Yeah. On the subject of Hopkins and sparing their blushes, I don't have a name for this, but it just says iPhone, and I'm afraid, Chris, your what I think is a very nice design for King Street has been, well, is iPhone available? And you can tell Chris what you think it is.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello, yes.
Hello there. Hello, good evening, everybody. Well, first, a huge thanks for this piece of work and the scheme. It's very easy to criticise, and my comment wasn't intended as such, so I can explain myself. But it's a fantastic scheme, and it will have taken a vast amount of work, and you can never please everybody. And there's a vast diversity in residents in Twickenham, which is one of its great benefits. But equally, nothing can always please everybody. So I just had really a question, and I think structurally and logistically, it's all fantastic. The range of activities that you've included, the range of facilities is brilliant. I just had a question on the aesthetics of the building on King Street. And I've actually recently watched some old footage of Twickenham going back decades, and it's fascinating. And Church Street is quite clearly the most historic element of it. The building on the front of Church Street, it's very difficult from the plans because it may vary, of course, but it looks to me extremely modern, very sort of like a sort of council building or leisure building of some description, something like that. And that just purely aesthetically with me jars a little bit with the history of Church Street. And I just wondered whether or not that was set in stone, or whether or not there was scope to not alter the function of the plan, but maybe the facade slightly to be a little more traditional and blend the newer bits going up Heath Road of Twickenham with their brilliant, wonderful historical elements of Church Street. It jarred slightly for me, and really you don't necessarily even have to answer that now, but if there's scope to consider it, then I just thought it merited the question. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much for your question. Chris, would you like to?
We go back to that image of King Street and things. Just it's probably just worth getting it up. So, I mean, I think you know, it's fair to say that there's still a bit more work that needs doing on that that building and that end elevation in particular. There probably is a need to structurally tie that roof together, and there is a bit of detail and things that needs to go into it. I mean, part of the aim of that building was that you can see the brick base to it is only effectively sort of 2 stories high, and the aim was that that brick base sort of relates to the Wake and Payne building that you can see on the other side of the road at the end of Church Street, and so that in terms of scale and things, there was a relationship to that building on that side, whilst the overall building height relates to the other buildings in King Street, which tend to be slightly bigger and things than that. But I mean, I think there is a level of detail that needs looking at, and we will be doing so over the next few months before we put a planning application in. So it's not the final piece of work, and I think there is some further work that needs doing to it.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to a question from Karen Swift now, regarding proposals for parking Eel Pie Island. So if Mick Potter or Nick O'Donnell is standing by, because we have done a recent consultation exercise where a lot of work has been done specifically regarding the parking availability. So Karen, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Hi.
Hello.
Thank you for this. And yeah, I've been a resident of Twickenham all my life and on Eel Pie Island, so very much invested in this piece of work. And I think my 3 key things are all based around accessibility. One for obviously the residents of Eel Pie Island, because a shed load of parking spaces, accessibility for not only residents but also the trade and craftsmen and workers on the island, and also disability, elderly people, families with young children. That whole demographics of people have been completely dismissed in these plans. I think I just want to make it clear, I'm absolutely up for redesigning the space. It's been needed for many years. As I said, I've lived here for years. It's totally well overdue, and we want to make it a destination. It used to be a destination when it was a swimming pool, and you know, that gave it a unique USP over and above what you're absolutely planning now. It could be what you're planning now could be anywhere, apart from we have the river frontage. But we need to make the best of it. I'm totally up for that. It doesn't need to be a glorified parking lot, which it is at the moment, but we still need to acknowledge and respect the fact that there are a lot of people that live on the island and the local residents that need parking, accessibility of all age ranges, of all trades. And I think that's been completely dismissed. And I'm not really sure what sort of people you're intending to come. Have you looked at do you know the numbers of people that are coming, and are they just going to be walking here? You know, is it going to be good for retail? How is this all going to, how does it all stack up really?
Okay, well,
why is there no underground parking?
Sure, I'll let Mick Potter talk about the parking, and then I will come back to the question about, you know, have we looked into how people are getting here, what people are going to do, etc.
Right, hello, good evening everyone. As you'll recall, we did a consultation last year on the parking zone that we got, which is quite a large area, which runs from the railway bridge at Heath Road eastwards all the way up to the railway station, and then further eastwards up towards Richmond, just past Lebanon Park. What we did the consultation. We looked at a number of options, as Nick O'Donnell, my colleague, explained earlier, about providing more spaces in the zone. Around 30 spaces we're able to provide, but also redesignating some of the spaces. That was all covered in the committee report going back to the 5th of November to our Transport and Air Quality Committee. In turning to the issue of this immediate area, we have been asked to do an additional piece of work in looking at the parking for the Eel Pie residents, and the traders have come up as well, of course, from the Eel Pie Association have raised that with us. So what we're doing at the moment, we've been asked to look at a specific zone for this area at the Riverside. So it would include the embankment area up to Church Lane and probably beyond that up to the Riverside. The result of this could be, we'd have to look at the feasibility needs to be looked at, is that this could be a subzone, say for instance D1, the existing zone is D, a D1 area, which would then only allow permit holders of that area, residents, to park in the embankment area, you know, the spaces between Water Lane up to Church Lane, past the Barmy Arms, and then the spaces on the Riverside, as you know, that could be included as well. It wouldn't allow people from Zone D if this was, obviously it's all part of the feasibility work. So we'd have to look at whether the pros and cons of this have to be completely open, and to see whether it would work. It would mean that residents from the other parts of the zone wouldn't drive down to the river, and that's not really what this is about. We obviously would encourage those people obviously to come by, come walk down, cycle down even, but not bring the cars down. The visitors overall in the area will be encouraged to use the two. Well, there's 4 car parks: Holly Road, Aragon Road, Church Lane, and York House. But basically, for this immediate area, we are looking at a separate zone. And we would not, obviously, as part of that, appreciate that the provision would probably not meet the demand there. So obviously, as if people couldn't get spaces, you know, from the Eel Pie or the Bell Lane or Water Lane residences there couldn't park around the embankment area, they could still park in the rest of the zone. So it would be more of a scheme that would make it more of a better chance for people such as yourself to park around where you live. In terms of the traders, that has been discussed, and I believe some spaces were being looked at for that area. Certainly some provision. We do understand that there are traders doing work on Eel Pie Island. We've been in discussions with the association about that to see what provision can be made. But as I say, further work is being done on this.
Okay, just thank you very much for that update on the parking, Mick. And just in terms of the broader points, there are 2 areas. I mean, I'm going to bring Anna Sadler in to mention about the retail response at the moment. Just in terms of what studies have been done. Yes, there's been so many studies across very many, you know, the Barefoot study, all of these things which have been about what people want and what people are looking for, all of these things over many decades, to be honest, in terms of what people are looking for. But I would always just point to things which you can see now in terms of, you know, what people like and what people appreciate. And I would point first and foremost to the huge success that has been the pedestrianisation of Church Street, which has just seen people coming out and really enjoying the local open space that is possible when there's no cars and things buzzing around and getting in their way. And that's been a real success. Unfortunately, local international events have rather put paid to that for the time being, and we're looking forward to when that can, you know, restart again. But I would also point to Richmond Riverside, which is an absolute beacon. People will flock to Richmond Riverside when there's nice weather. Even when it's not particularly nice, you will see it busy and thrumming with people who are just there trying to enjoy, you know, the riverside in the natural open setting. So those are the people, those are the sorts of things that we're trying to attract with this development. And Anna Sadler is about to tell us about responses from the bids, from Church Street, and indeed King Street Essential Living.
Thanks. Yes, and I know that the ward councillors have also been having conversations with some of the business owners as well. So throughout the last several months, we've met with various groups and organisations. So as Councillor Roberts says, the Business Improvement District, the Church Street Traders, and Essential Living, who own the properties on King Street. I would say Essential Living have been incredibly supportive of what we're trying to do here, and actually positively working with us to make sure that we get the right scheme and the right design. And Church Street in the bid, we've been feeding in and listening to the feedback that we've had from them, which in my opinion has been largely positive. They've certainly given us some constructive feedback on units and what kind of USP we're trying to create for Twickenham, what the feel needs to be, and we've responded to that in the design, trying to really extend what's happening on Church Street down Water Lane and into the site. So we're very much working with those groups and those business owners to try and create a destination here. I don't know if Councillor Chard wanted to add anything about the conversations that you've had. I just realised we have to unmute you for you to be able to talk.
Councillor Chard.
Yes, no, I've got little to add. I mean, as ward councillors, we're constantly in touch with the different businesses in the area on an informal and formal basis. They're very welcoming of the overall strategy, the overall approach. They've got a mixture of opinions and a mixture of comments, as everyone does, but they're really excited about the opportunity to get people coming into Twickenham Town Centre, staying there for a period of time, enjoying the gardens more, and just really sort of enjoying that whole space for a period of time. And, you know, if people come to those Riverside Gardens, they will stay and enjoy Church Street, enjoy the restaurants and cafes there and things like that. And that's sort of understood that it has knock-on benefits to the whole of the retail offering in the centre of Twickenham. So people have been very positive about that. It's recognised also that there will be some loss of parking, but that's a trade-off which, from discussions with businesses, they are willing to make.
Right.
Okay, thank you, James. Karen, is that answering your question for you? I think we may have. No.
Thank you. Sorry, I was cut off and then I was put on
Sorry
mute.
about that.
That was quite a long-winded response, but thank you, all of you that responded for that. It still doesn't really answer the question of what viable provision has been made for accessibility for not only the residents of Eel Pie Island, also the local residents. You're bringing in more people to live here. Undeniably, they will have cars and their own transport. And you're blocking off anyone from accessing this area completely. Look, I don't want it to be a glorified car park, but you need to, if you're taking something away, you need to have a viable, and the USP of Twickenham is Eel Pie Island. The workers, the tradesmen, the craftsmanship that goes on in this island is the USP, and you are forcing everybody to close down, get out of business, and it's
I'm sorry, I think that's a rather apocalyptic statement, if you don't mind me saying so. First and foremost, the question about whether the people who are going to be coming, you know, the additional residents will have parking rights has been addressed already. No, they won't. We are trying as much as we possibly can to ensure that the provision of parking, which is directly next to the site, is being re-provided very close to, and we heard about the possibility of creating the new D1 parking area, which will be specifically for people living either on Eel Pie Island or in the surrounding area. And of course, we made sure that there is going to be parking.
Where is that going to be, the D1 parking? Is that by Barmy Arms, or is it
around this
like? Do you know how many residents and workers live on the island? Do you know that
We're
number?
more than welcome.
Yes,
we're more than willing to.
You've got the people.
We do know. I mean, I think, can I make the broad point that
yes, you can.
We are engaging with Eel Pie. You know, I can see Nick O'Donnell nodding away. The amount of effort we're putting into trying to find solutions that satisfy Eel Pie in the round is a huge amount of effort. I'm not sure we'll satisfy every islander, but we're making and continue to make those efforts. So be assured of that at the very least.
Okay, thank you for that. So we're going to move on to Susanna Simon now.
Okay, thank you very much for a very clear presentation. I have two questions.
Yes.
The first one you sort of started to answer, but I'm a bit sceptical, and it's about retail. And we already have a lot of empty units in Twickenham, and we had them even pre-COVID. And it was also noticeable that quite a lot of the new flats that have been built have had struggled to fill the retail space underneath. So I was wondering how we would fill the shops. And then the second question was, when do you think it might be ready? And what will be the impact on access to the river whilst the building is taking place?
Okay, who would like to take this one? Obviously, any provision of new retail space is going to be slightly, what's the word I'm looking for, speculative. We don't have people lined up ready and raring to take on the sites, but I should imagine that with a prime site such as this, it won't be difficult to fill the spaces. In terms of the access to the river, is Paul Chadwick, you said that you were the man in charge of the development overall?
I mean, it's a good question, and I have to admit, we're so engaged in the detail of the scheme itself, we haven't turned much to that yet. But the scheme will be built out in probably 2 phases, so that gives us opportunity for building it out in a way that will continue to allow access to the river. That will be, I'm pretty sure that will be a requirement of the council, as with its separate hat on as local planning authority anyway. But I just need to admit, we haven't looked at the detail of exactly how that phasing of the construction will work. It will be 2+ years worth of construction, so we will have to worry about your point. That's the best I can say at the moment. We're committed to trying to have as much access as possible to the river and to traffic through the construction period. But exactly how we deliver it, a lot of detailed work to come.
Okay, thank you. Yes, of course.
Thank you. So I just wanted to add to the retail question, because Susanna, it's a question that we ask and we discuss in the design team frequently. So part of the work that we've been trying to do with the local businesses is understand what is going to fill those units. We have consultants on board that are advising us about placemaking studies. So we're very much not looking at this site as purely, what's the most money we can make out of these retail spaces, but without knowing that we can actually get the tenants in there. We're looking at it as a place, as Twickenham. What kind of tenants do we want in there? How can we attract them? What do we, the council, have to do to enable that? We will do a piece of work to start a sort of soft marketing exercise to find out what kind of tenants would be attracted, and that will come in the later months now. So it's a question that we're asking ourselves, and particularly in the current time, everything that's happening with the pandemic, and what will the future look like for retail. So we're taking advice, we're trying to plan forwards, and really looking at this as a place, as a whole place, and not just retail units that we can fill.
Okay. Does that answer your questions? No, I think my hosts are being trigger happy with the mute button the minute that people have finished speaking.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to move on to Diego, who has a question regarding the food court, well, the food provision. And it's an interesting one, actually. It's not something which I've given consideration to. So if Diego's there.
Yeah, I'm here. Hi. Firstly, a very nice project, very interesting. I like the general concept, and I think it will make quite a big difference. I cycle to Twickenham from where I live, which is St Margaret's, every day. So I know the place very well, and it's very enjoyable to just sit there and enjoy looking at the Eel Pie Island and everything that goes on. So the question 2, really, this is the first one, which is, the concept of a food court or hawkers center, if you want to call it that, I think should be considered. It gives you the advantages of having the ability to offer local entrepreneurs, startups, the ability to, show off their offer. It tends to be obviously smaller businesses than, the big pub chains or the big restaurant chains that we seem to be, dominating everywhere. And it would most probably enhance local employment opportunities and give people a much greater variety than if it is just one pub or one restaurant, one menu, one type of food. So, for you to consider, in your thinking. And the second point was, the question of parking. Has there been any considerations, given that the 2 buildings are brand new, to look into basically underground car parking facilities? I'm not suggesting that you build, 3-story car parks below ground, but at least to equal the number of car parks, existing car parking facilities, or maybe a little bit more for the local traders and whoever is going to come and live there.
We have. I can assure you that the idea of underground parking has been looked at in great. Well, sorry, this is a terrible pun. In great depth. But unfortunately, the cost of the creation of an underground parking space plus the flood risk directly adjacent to the river, you wouldn't believe the Environment Agency and the fun we've had with them. I believe that it would make that unviable. In terms of the food court, the Hawker Centre, it's an interesting idea, and it's certainly one which I'm happy to take up with the project managers and with the team as we progress the scheme going forward. So thank you very much for your questions on that.
Good luck.
Thank you. And we're going to move, Sandra Cox has got a very quick question regarding the grassed area in front of the cafe. Is it on the slope or is it level? So Sandra Cox, if you're there, and whilst we're unmuting you, we will get the graphic up showing the grassed area in front of the cafe, if we could.
Yeah, the answer is it's both.
There we are.
There are flat areas and then there are sloping areas in between. So there's a series of terraces, and what you can see there on the left hand side is a flat terrace, and then where the steps are going off sort of diagonally from that, there's a sloped area to transition up to a higher level, and then there's another flat terrace of lawn area. So in fact there are 3 terraces in total that bring you up from the embankment level up to the main garden level, and they're accessible from the ramp that goes up the side from the embankment. So each of them will have a sort of a landing area that gives access onto that flat level of grass.
But you can walk from the bottom terrace on the grass all the way up. Presumably there's a slight slope between each terrace level.
There is, yeah. And the exact slope is yet to be determined, but it may be a bit steepish to walk up that slope. The aim is to sort of get a usable flat area as much as possible in between that accommodates the change in level.
Right, I understand.
Yeah.
So it makes each level quite small in comparison then to the whole space.
Yeah, but they're because they're flat, they are usable for doing things, having things on and doing things on. So if
there was no consideration given to sort of leveling it out at a lower level.
You then at some point you have to then achieve the change in level, and what we're trying to do is to avoid having big retaining walls. So by doing it in small steps, we're able to sort of keep it a bit more gradual and a bit more sort of visually accessible, really.
Right.
So
okay.
I think if we can go to the last image, you can see it on there maybe a bit better actually. So if you go to the very last, the aerial shot at the end.
Send you home.
So I don't know whether we can, not sure you can zoom in on that, but you can sort of see there the sort of the terracing, and it also relates to the steps that go up the side. So where the banks are is where the steps are on the coming up from Water Lane along the front of the cafe. So you can see the steps.
It looks
banks sort of come off from that. So the flat level relates to the level bit of paving in between.
Right. Got you. Okay, I can see that a bit better now. Thank you. I just wanted to say actually that overall, I mean, I've lived in Twickenham for just over 20 years now, and I've seen so many different designs, and this is the first one that I actually like, and I think it's really good.
Thank you very much for that. It's really much appreciated. So thank you. And we're going to move on to Katie Lee, who has a question regarding design for sharing space, walking, scooting, cycling. Not necessarily all at the same time for the same person, but.
Thank you. I am not going to ask my original question. You have answered it through a previous question, but it was to reiterate many times the ability to cycle and walk within a shared space is often taken away at a last moment due to not considering that detail design at the concept stage. So that was really more of a design question. It's not something that has to be thought about now. My second question was actually about phasing. You've also answered that question. And so my third thing was that, in fact, I am actually a council officer for London Borough of Camden, working in the Transport and Urban Realm area. So I'm partly viewing this to see how your consultation process is going and the use of Zoom to present and have a Q&A session. So well done. And I will be taking back this feedback of this process to my council. And so I want to find out how you as council are finding this useful, and also the participants as well.
It will be difficult for me to ask all of the participants, but I think that I find these Zoom meetings incredibly helpful. It gives far more immediacy to things. It makes you think on your feet as well, rather than. And the one thing which I would say about this type of meeting is that you do get new people coming along, and it isn't just the friendly and familiar faces that we're used to seeing at consultation events.
Well rescued, Gareth.
Yeah, it does bring in a lot more people. So I think that these are the way forward. And if you want me to sell it to Georgia next time I speak to her, I would be happy to do so. So thank you very much for your questions. And we're going to move now to Priya, who has a couple of questions. If we can try and keep questions as brief as we can, we're down to the last 20 minutes. And we want to get as much in as we can. So Priya, are you there?
It is unmuted.
Hello, Priya. Okay, we can't get Priya up online. Her questions, I will make sure, Priya, that we get back to you with a written answer to your questions, as they're both very useful. One is to reducing traffic flow in the new development, and the other one is about a design which is going to be friendly, for example, people with dementia, which I know that Roger Crouch, one of the ward councillors, is particularly interested in, as he is our borough's dementia champion. So I will make sure that you get an answer to both of your questions sometime later this week, Priya. So we're going to move on to Andrew Mackenzie regarding cladding.
My main question, my question was picking up on the residents of Eel Pie Island, is to have the council got the registered parking holders residents in D1 to the available resident parking places. I noticed in the parking plan there was some overspill into other areas, and there's reliance on private car parks like the one near Waitrose for extra parking overspill. Well, that private car park is not open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for example. So I wonder about the parking design, and I'm very worried that, in fact, the reliance of good retail in Twickenham Centre is reliant on good parking, and you've underestimated the dislocation of the parking that all this development involves.
Gareth, do you mind if I ask Mr. Nick O'Donnell to come in on that again? But my initial point would be, actually the Waitrose car park is owned by the council, entirely in our control. So that's why it is part of the solution, albeit a small part of the solution. Nick.
Thanks, Paul. Just to say, and I'm sure people are aware of this because it's picked up in the member committee report, but the council has undertaken numerous surveys looking at parking and demand and activity surveys across the area across a number of years. We've done 4 or 5 extensive surveys looking at the activity, looking at the use of each bailiff and different types of users, looking at how each area is in specific small part of area is being used over what times of day. We've looked at parking demand. We've looked at parking supply. We've also looked at capacity within the 4 car parks that Mick Potter highlighted. The first headline that came out of the very first study was that there was overall 10% spare capacity in relation to overall amounts of car parking if you redistribute and refocus on where the demand actually is. There's a lot of bays that are designated for certain types of use that aren't actually being actively used. And the other point to make is that Holly Road car park, Aragon Road car park have considerable capacity within them. So there is ample space to pick up on future and growth in potential parking within the area. We're very comfortable that the redistribution within the proximity of the site, and by that I mean within a few hundred meters maximum, can accommodate all of the movements and all demand.
Okay. Thank you for those responses regarding parking. I'm conscious that we're at 1:45, so I'm going to move on to Dion Lombard, who wishes to ask a question about truck movements along the riverbank.
Yes, thank you, Gareth.
Hey, Dion.
I know we're short of time, so I'll try obviously to be as brief, but I am enormously encouraged by what I've seen this evening. And I must congratulate Hopkins, Chris Bannister, and your team. I think, you know, I know I have experience as well. You're working against some really difficult odds, and I think you're doing a great job. Having said that, there are a couple of issues that I really am concerned about, and I know the group I'm with, Twickenham Riverside Park team. The little dotted line showing truck movements on an occasional basis along the riverside, I think is a thin end of the wedge. I cannot understand, knowing the site very well and having looked at it from a professional point of view with engineers as well, why we need to have those trucks along the riverside, except emergency vehicles. Of course, that goes without saying. I am convinced, and I know that it is possible to have small vehicles going up and down Wharf Lane and larger vehicles, as you do have to go up and down a water lane. It can be done. There's no doubt in my mind about that. So I do have to ask the question, why on earth do we need to make provision for trucks or other vehicles for that matter traveling along the riverside when the prime principle, one of the prime principles of this entire exercise was to create a car-free, vehicle-free riverside. I just want to add one further thing, which people may not be aware of. The southwest corner of the site is a very, very important part of the site. And I think Chris may or may not agree with me on that. It's where the new boathouse facility or the old boathouse facilities are going to be developed, access to the river, all sorts of things. Are we really going to have commercial trucks driving through that fairly limited space on an occasional basis, and how occasional will this be? I do have other questions, but I realize we're short for time, and I think that's a cardinal one. Thank you.
Okay, so who would like to take the issue of vehicle movements, a very limited number of vehicle movements at highly specified times of day across the riverside?
So Nick's putting his hand up, but I mean, I'll start by saying, I've got a great lot of sympathy for your position, Dion. And we've challenged as a team, we've challenged hard on this point to try and avoid that need for any vehicles at even limited times. But we really struggled to agree with your consultant's view, actually, after challenge, I have to say. But Nick, do you want to say more?
I think you've made the key point, which is that the council's original position was very much that, and I think rightly said by the gentleman, which is that we wanted to limit the amount and absolutely ideally eliminate some of the very large trucks going down there. However, the key point is that in the detailed conversations that we've had with the businesses down there, in the representations that have been made, particularly by the likes of the boatyard, where they do have very infrequent but significantly large vehicles that have to come down there. And the very strong representations we've had is that we have to accommodate some of those limited movements. They don't happen that often, but we have to make provision for them.
Can we be specific on this? Are we talking about the 16.5 meter articulated truck specifically?
Yeah.
Because I know, and I'm prepared to be challenged on this in any way you like, that it is possible to take a truck like that up and down Water Lane without going along the riverside. It does mean having to look at how you exit into King Street, which means that area, which I was going to ask about, that public area, and there was a lady who spoke about the facade of that building, that entire area needs to be developed in far greater detail. And part of that detail could incorporate allowing a large vehicle on a very, very occasional basis to access King Street. Rather, are we really going to ruin our riverside with a 16.5 meter Arctic turning around the southwest corner of the site when there is a solution going up Water Lane? And that I would be prepared to challenge anybody on that point this evening.
Dion, what I'm more than happy to do is to take this conversation further offline, because look, you know
Okay.
as well as I do.
No, fair enough. I just think there needs to be an awareness, Gareth, which, you know, we talk about transparency. I think the people at Twickenham need to know that there isn't just one solution, which is what we're being proposed here tonight.
Absolutely. And you
And
know,
we can
as I
avoid
say,
it.
you know as well as I do that if I could get the vehicles off the site altogether, I would.
You can, Gareth. I can tell you can.
I would be happy to have the conversation offline, but it's a bit niche and it's a bit abstruse.
No, I understand. Well, it's actually not that niche. Having a 16.5 meter Arctic truck driving along where we want a pedestrianised area is not niche.
Okie dokie. So we're going to move on to, let me see.
Thank you.
Let me see. These are prepared. Thank you, Dion. I'm just trying to go through into the next one. So Graham Strudwick wishes to ask exit from Water Lane onto King Street. If you keep it brief, Graham.
Thank
you. To some extent, that's been covered by Dion. He raised the issue of the top of Water Lane at the exit into King Street. There is some important detailed traffic analysis that needs to be done there, but I'm in complete agreement with Dion that large vehicles can successfully turn around and go back up Water Lane. It's easily possible to show that with tracking processes on CAD, and then you could have a demonstration on site. But I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Graham. We're going to move on to James Carson, who asked a question. Other than the restaurant pub, how many commercial spaces will be available, and will they favour independent shops?
Yeah, well, you kind of just said my question then. Yeah, because you mentioned the pub and restaurant, and I was wondering where would they be based again, and yeah, like how many commercial places will be available.
Okay, can we bring up the slides, please? And if Chris can be standing by to give us a brief overview of that.
The proposal is that at the sort of southeastern end of the Wharf Lane building, that dark blue. Oops, you've gone. Okay, there we go. Sorry, carry on. Go on, not. Yeah, there we go. So the dark blue rectangle you can see there at the bottom of the Wharf Lane building on the left-hand side, that is the pub restaurant space that's been designated. Underneath that, in the basement area underneath it, there will be a kitchen space that's linked to it. And there's then commercial retail spaces and things to the north of that, the green areas. We're not being specific about what those are at the moment. So, I mean, potentially they could be subject to sort of planning issues and things, used for other functions. And in theory, I suppose the purple retail units on the right-hand side could also be, depending on sort of any planning restrictions on use. But I mean, at the moment, we're not being particularly specific about things. What we have said is the pub restaurant at the southern end of the Wharf Lane looks like a good idea, as would a cafe at the southern end of the Water Lane building.
The only thing I'd add is that every time Chris says pub stroke restaurant, I have to say I kind of more think restaurant probably, but I know there are different views on that, but I kind of reckon it would more likely be a good restaurant.
Okay. And in terms of, I mean, yes, independent shops would love to have independent retailers there, of course. It's not to say that there is no place at all for chains, and we will be, sensitive as to the retail use that we make of these spaces.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm keen to move on. So Ramachandra had a question about transportation in more detail.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I think as the discussion progressed, I got more and more clear about the transportation scheme. But is there a possibility to actually see this presentation separately? Is it somewhere publicly available?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's going to be
Okay.
on the council website, and you can browse to your heart's content. If you're doing it on a tablet, then you can go vroom,
Yeah.
and make it
Okay.
go.
In that case, I'll do that separately. I have a small second point. It's just a comment, really, along the water lane, the proposed building facade. Generally, the architecture is, I think, very in keeping with the scale and nature of the whole Twickenham, the Riverside development, the existing buildings, etc. But that particular facade, I find it has a very long stretch, and it's slightly, I think, monotonous, and as it is the gateway for the visitors, and it's the beginning of the journey, and there are a lot of commercial units there. Probably that facade could be slightly more animated without undermining the overall concept approach, because across the road, the existing residential buildings have also quite a variety of architecture there. And I think there is an opportunity to be slightly more vibrant, I think. That's a small architectural suggestion on it. Yeah.
Okay. Chris Bannister.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a bit more detail that needs looking at in terms of those buildings. I mean, I think it's something that we will be looking at the next stage. And I think your comments are noted, and we will be looking at things in a bit more detail.
Thank you very much, and wish you very good luck. Yeah.
Thank you. And I think it's also fair to say that when those retail units are all occupied, of course, the variety of retail we hope will be on offer.
Yeah. It's just looking from long distance. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so we are 2 minutes towards the end. I'm going to take one more question, which is Diego. I'm afraid you've already had a question, so I'm going to ask one last one, which is from Ian Crockford, and then I'll be bringing the meeting to a close with an assurance to you all, which you may be looking forward to, you might not. Is Ian Crockford still on the call?
Hello, Gareth, I am, yes. And thank you again. I'll just echo the compliments to Chris and your team for a fantastic scheme that's been developed here. Well, my question is that it's to Paul, really. Having been in these shoes many times on large development jobs in London, and try and get some pre-construction advice from contractors now, and really assure yourself of that cost plan, because it's a fantastic scheme, and the budget's tight, it's ambitious, and I would hate to see it being value engineered and downgraded later with all the apologies. And so just assure yourself as much as you can now of the phasing, the access, how much of that Riverside really can you give when you're developing this scheme out. All these things can add cost, and just assure yourself you get the most cost effective way of developing.
Yeah. Thanks for that. That's exactly what I've got a team around me, and we're constantly worrying about exactly the points you're making. Really, we don't want to compromise later. Absolutely not. That's not our intent. This scheme will not wash its face. We've accepted that, and to an extent, that's a good thing in that it means you're not constantly worrying about X% profit. But yeah, we're worrying about all those points, and thanks for making them.
Okay, so thank you very much for those people who've been able to put their questions to us directly this evening. It is now 8 o'clock, and we do have quite a few other questions still to get through, and it would be very easy to keep going, and there's always a cutoff point of when you decide to stop. So what we will be doing is getting all of the questions. We're going to harvest all of the questions from the chat before we finish. We're going to make sure that those questions are answered directly to the people who place them by email. And just so, to avoid there's going to be any sort of possible question of us ducking questions or not being willing to answer the questions, which may be a bit tough, I'm going to ask my comms team to ensure that in the websites, the consultation websites, that those questions, the answers to those questions are made freely available. So anybody who's been part of this meeting this evening, who may have quite liked to have heard the answer to question X, Y, or Z, can get the answer to question X, Y, or Z. So it only leaves for me to thank all of those people who've taken part this evening. Chris, for his excellent presentation. I hope you were as enthused as I was about what you saw. To my officers, Paul Chadwick, Nick O'Donnell, Mick Potter, Anna Sadler, and everybody that's taken part in answering the questions. To, of course, Ellie Firth and our comms team, who've done absolutely splendid and sterling work in making sure that we've been able to get this meeting out to as many people as possible. And of course, as always, the ward councillors, of course, they will be after my neck if I forget to mention them. But as always, for events such as these, the big thanks goes chiefly to yourselves, because you are the people who make these events worthwhile. So there is only one thing for me to do now, which is to suggest that if you have thoughts, immediately you can go straight to the council website, richmond.gov.uk, and feedback through the consultation process. And other than that, I wish you a very quiet, safe, and socially distanced good evening. Thank you.